Welcome to the Set Prep Slayer. I'm your host, Cameron Scott Kirk. Today we are looking at semicolons in lists. Semicolons have many functions, lists being one of them, and I'm just going to focus on the use of semicolons in lists today because it's relatively complex and we're going to need some time to focus in and zero in on this one particular use of the semicolon. So semicolons in lists. Now, straight off the bat, most lists do not include semicolons. They simply use commas. That's where it gets a bit tricky. So let's get into semicolons used in complex lists. Before we begin, I'd like to give you the opportunity to look at a question from the SAT and how semicolons are being used here. Just pause the video very briefly, have a look at this question, try to figure out what the answer is, and then come back to me. Now, if you're not going to pause, I will go straight on. Okay, so this is quite a complicated looking question, isn't it? The correct answer here is B. Now, we'll get into why at this point. Before we do that, let's go back. I'm going to give you an example of a list in a sentence. It is the sentence right here. Eating fruits, vegetables, and meats allowed him to stay healthy. There are two commas, including the Oxford comma, which is the comma preceding and. And the Oxford comma is not actually necessary, but the SAT people do love their Oxford commas. So there are two commas. It's a list of three things. Fruits, vegetables, and meats. Not too much confusion. The problem happens when you get a sentence like this. Eating fruits such as apples, vegetables such as broccoli, and meat such as beef allowed him to stay healthy. Now there are 6 commas. We have a problem. This is a mess. Too many commas. The problem is this, that the list and a sublist, when they are integrated, it's the sublist that complicates things. How do we make this a bit simpler? Well, let's talk about lists and sublists. So I'm going to name the list in my sentence 1 for fruits, 2 for vegetables, and 3 for meats. That's a very creative naming. The sublist will be A, lowercase, B, lowercase, and C, lowercase. How do we put 1, 2, 3, and ABC together? This is how it's done. Eating fruits, comma, such as apples, semicolon, vegetables, comma, such as broccoli, semicolon, and meats, comma, such as chicken, allowed him to stay healthy. Now what we're doing here is using semicolons to get back to the main list. Commas are being used to separate the sublist. So, it's eating fruits, 1, such as apples, A. Vegetables, 2, such as broccoli, B. And meats, 3, such as chicken, C. Allowed him to stay healthy. Let's just go back to the main list up here. All we're doing is we are using semicolons between the main list. Okay, that's it. And we're just going to use commas between the main list and the sublist. So let's look at this in action. Well, here's the first question up here. Now, can you see the list and the sublist? We're talking about a list of literary works. The first one in that list is The Joys of Motherhood. That's number 1. You will notice the comma here to separate 1 from 1A. And the sublist is just giving us a little bit more information about the titles or the novels themselves. So we've got 1 and then it goes to 1A. As we have seen, we're using a comma here. The Joys of Motherhood is actually a novel about the changing roles of women in 1950s Lagos. Now, here's the second thing in the list. Here's number 2. It's called A Kind of Marriage. Now, do you remember how we get back to the main list? That's right. semicolons. So we're left with two choices, B and D. Now what comes after? So we'll number them 2 from our list. Now how do we get to the sublist again? Well, we need a comma. A Kind of Marriage is a television play about the private struggles of a newlywed couple in Nigeria. How do we get into there? Well, there's the comma for the sublist, B. So the television play is the B. And here is the semicolon to get us back to number 3. And the comma, to get us to C. So let's go through that again really briefly. We now know that semicolons are used to separate main lists and commas for the sublist. If The Joys of Motherhood is number 1 on our main list and A Kind of Marriage is number 2 on our main list, we need that semicolon to get back to the main list and the comma to get to the sublist. Let's do another example down here. Can you see the list here? Using natural debris, comma, such as dried leaves. Okay, so number 1 on our list is natural debris. The A is dried leaves. How do we get back to the main list? The second thing on the list is man-made trash. How do we get back? Well, it's going to be a semicolon to get back to the main list. So we're left with 2 options here. So the dried leaves is the sublist, 1A. They both use semicolons correctly. Man-made trash is number 2 on our list, main list. But how do we get to the sublist? Well, there's the comma, giving us an example of man-made trash, such as plastic bags. So number B is the correct answer here. It gives us a semicolon to get back to the main list and the comma to introduce the sublist. And you'll notice again up here, to get us back to more traditional art supplies, which is number 3, we need the semicolon, and then the sublists such as tree glue. So what we have in effect is a very simple structure. Well, it's not simple. It's 1, comma A, semicolon, 2, comma B, semicolon, 3, comma C. The main list of 1, 2, 3 are separated by semicolons. The sublist by commas. That's a doozy. I have to say, the first time I came upon this question, I had to think it through. And having thought it through, I presented to you just how semicolons do work in lists. I hope that clarifies everything. And remember, the SAT College Board are your enemy. I am your friend. Together, we will slay the SAT.